presentation tonight is kind of about staffing your own company. I'm calling it Grow Your Own. I started Southern Cloud Solutions in 2012. And we're a Florida women-owned small business. And we're kind of lean and mean, but we're based in Cocoa Beach, but my entire team is remote and has been for a couple of years now. I myself started off as a software engineer working in government contracts and doing Army network management software, and had quite a career doing that. Also spent some time programming machine tools to make parts for cars. So I've kind of had I am more nerdy than you, Giselle. So I've a lot longer to have more experience and more nerdiness, I guess. So I do have degrees in computer science and actually working on a PhD in computer engineering. I'm a kind of a lifelong learner, and I kind of look for that in other people as well. But I do have 11 Salesforce certifications. I am going up the chain of the architect side. I have application architect, and I have got one more to get to system architect. So I really do love the Salesforce platform, and I think I do a decent job sharing my excitement about all of the possibilities within it to my customers and to the people that work for us. So what happened and how I kind of fell into it is I started the company, and it was just me being a contractor. And I was working with a company who needed a lot of work done. And it was the suggestion of the customer. He's like, you need to hire some people. You need to build a bigger team because we want you to do more stuff. And I said, okay. So at the time, in 2012, I found it harder to find people with Salesforce experience. And understanding the platform and understanding what is involved in doing Salesforce, I realized that this is an opportunity that will allow people to get certifications and not necessarily have to have formal degrees and have a career. And it kind of dawned on me that there's a lot of people in the community and everywhere that have the capabilities to do these things and be an admin or be a developer, but maybe don't really understand what the possibilities are. And when you think about opportunities, if you told my 25-year-old self that this is what I would be doing right now, running my own consulting business, I would have told you were crazy. I didn't see a computer until I was in college. So I'm dating myself, but I think the point of that is you don't know what you're going to be able to do 10, 20, 30 years from now, because it might not even exist yet, right? So I think that's something I like to put across to other people as well, is you don't know what you don't know. And so you got to just leave yourself open to try different things and learn those things, right? And you have to have mentors and you have to have people supporting you. But you can find people almost anywhere. I have funny stories about how I have run into people and had conversations with them and then realized that, this is the person who could do this. I once worked with a guy who was in the Geek Squad at Best Buy. Turns out to be a fabulous consultant. So, I met someone who was taking some college classes and made the best skinny margarita you've ever had in your life. And he's working for me. He is one of my best developers for sure. But it's kind of, the next step is you got to find those qualities that allow them to do that sort of a job, right? They've got to have perseverance, right? They can't give up. If they can't figure it out one way, they've got to attack it from a different perspective. In Salesforce, that's really true because there's always 2 or 3 ways to solve a particular problem. And they've got to have some curiosity. You're introducing them to something that they didn't even really know existed. So they've got to have the curiosity and the wherewithal to kind of go look around and see what you're talking about. They need to be problem solvers. That's what we're doing every day. And sometimes that's the most fun, especially when you're talking about, administrators and coders and stuff. It's like, you're solving a problem. How do I solve it? Here's here's the problem. Here's the design of how we're going to achieve that. And here's the end result. And the other thing I talk about all the time with my team is the debugging brain, right? When I was in my early software training, they used to say, if you want to figure out what's wrong with your code, you got to think like the computer. You literally have to follow the steps of where that code is going, and pretend you're a piece of data. And I thought it was the weirdest thing to say, but that's really what debugging is you're looking for clues and you're looking for what path that is going on, because debugging is a big part of development, right? And understanding what paths your logic can take and making sure that, you're not going to run into any errors. You also got to look for a commitment. Are the people that you're talking to committed to kind of bringing their career to the next level and committed to being in this journey with you? Are they all in? And so those are some of the qualities that I kind of look for in people. And I have them from all walks of life. And I believe that maybe only one even knew Salesforce existed before they met me. And so that's the fun. I found that I get a great deal of enjoyment watching other people be successful in this space, and their excitement and their wanting to learn the next step. A lot of the people who work for me, they're just constantly getting certifications or badges or whatever, or trying to learn a new way to do something. And so how do you train people who have never seen this before, right? Well, I like to talk about responsibility, because some of this is their responsibility. And that goes back to those qualities that we talked about before, is they have to feel responsible for guiding their own path in some ways, because you can teach them a lot of things, but they have to learn a lot of it on their own as well. They have to try things. And that's what, developer boxes are for. And that's what Trailhead is for, is going and learning that stuff. And so I give my people a commitment of a certain amount of hours paid training. And beyond that, I want to see them feel that incentive to learn more themselves, because, I'm going to reward the extra work that they do to get there. And so that's my responsibility, is I'm going to pay for their certification tests. I'm going to give them a certain amount of hours of training paid for. We're a small company, so there's a certain amount of overhead we can handle, and, but I can't, it can't be endless, right? There's got to be boundaries on it. Reward the progress. If everyone who gets a certification, my employees who get certifications, they get rewarded. So, and sometimes I start little contests, like, all right, whoever gets, X amount of badges from now until the end of the year gets a gift card. Or if you get another certification, you get a monetary bonus, right? I want them to keep getting that, because that just makes our entire consultancy better. What I found is one of the most important things is to try to give people real life scenarios for them to toy with. One of the people that was trying to learn how to do community pages, I gave them a real life scenario. All right, we had a customer ask for this. How would you go about it? And they went and they dug in and they came up with a scenario, and it was a great one. But you've got to give them, sometimes the trailheads are a little too fluffy. These people want to know, if I'm doing this as a job, what are people going to be asking of me? So you want to give them real life scenarios of what customers have asked you before, and use that as a little bit of a test or a challenge for them to understand what is in the job, right? And I'm going back to debugging again. You got to teach those debugging concepts, because in Salesforce, debugging is a little bit old school, trying to follow the path of what happens and making sure that everything's running the way it should. Because if you're doing a lot of work for a customer, you might run into a problem where, a certain flow or process builder ran at a different time than some Apex code, and one affected the other in a certain scenario. And a lot of times people will be sitting there scratching their head going, I don't understand why that happened, because this is supposed to trigger when this. Well, there's a hierarchy, right? There's a hierarchy of events. And those are the kinds of things that you need to know. And the last thing on this is, there's some basics that sometimes you need to teach that is stuff that is not in Trailhead, stuff that you're not going to find in basic Salesforce training, especially if you have developers and they're going through, maybe they're not going through formal, computer science training, but there are still basic concepts that they need to understand before trying to attack writing Apex. For example, I was having this discussion with some the other day that when when you think about, maybe writing some Apex code or even doing a flow, number one, you've got to understand kind of what the language of making that happen is. You have to understand the concept of if-then statements and assignments and things like that. Then you got to understand the second kind of basic thing that I like to teach is everyone needs to understand what the data structures are that you're using, whether you're doing it in a flow or Apex or a process builder or a workflow. You need to understand those concepts. When do you use a map? When do you use a list? When do you use the different types of fields? And why do you use one over another, and what the point is, right? And then the third thing in kind of like those basics that are not necessarily covered is most of what you're doing when you're creating these flows and process builders and code is you're querying that database in the background, right? So it's a great idea for people to just understand what SOQL does, even though they may not have to necessarily code a SOQL statement to query the database. They really should understand what it is, because if you think about it, Salesforce reports are nothing but a background query of that database and then presenting a visual of that. Sometimes you have to break things up and let them understand those different components in that, because if you have them dive in too deeply into some of that stuff, they might get a little bit overwhelmed. So you kind of have to do it in baby steps. But it's all doable. It's all, there's so much material out there. And one of the things that my staff knows me for is I'm not Google. I am not Google. Do not Google me. So they have to have that kind of perseverance. Part of their responsibility in this is also to do their own research and look for those, because there's so many things that you do in Salesforce where someone has already had it happen and they already know what the answer is, right? Not too many of us are inventing things that have not been tried in that. So those are the things that you kind of have to understand when you're trying to train people, and use the people that have learned that and use them. We have almost like a hierarchy of mentors, and within that people know that they can reach out to. It doesn't always have to be me. It can be someone else. And so we kind of have a little bit of a hierarchy of that. And sometimes people just need to talk through what they're doing to make sure that and validate that what they're thinking is reality and that they're on the right path. And so that's what we have to do, is you got to check in with people all the time. And how do I mentor them? Well, I'm a big I'm a big fan of Brene Brown, and there's a lot of the concepts that she talks about. And I'm put a link in here as well, because it's a really interesting thing about kind of assessing your ability to lead people. And, I will be the first one to admit, I don't know it all. I do a lot of things wrong, but I do hopefully as much right. And that's why we are where we are, right? But you've got to establish some trust between yourself and these people that you're bringing up through the ranks to learn how to do this job. And the trust goes both ways. I need to trust them that they're going to take care of our customers, and they need to trust me that I've got their back and that I'm going to help them when they need help. And part of that is, everybody has a responsibility to vocalize those things to people. If you're having trouble, I expect it's their responsibility to raise up that hand and say, hey, I think I'm stumped on this one, right? And I have a responsibility to tell them, how I think they're doing and how maybe they can improve and what they can do to get to that next level. But sometimes that trust comes by kind of doing that showing of vulnerability. If I am the first one to say, wow, I really kind of didn't go about that the right way. If I'm going to say that to them, they're going to say it to me, right? If we're honest with each other and we're vulnerable and everyone understands that no one is perfect, then we're all going to be honest with each other. And there's just going to be a better feeling between everybody in the team if you have that kind of level of honesty. And I will be the first one, I think when some people work for really large companies, they get a little bit comfortable because they think that big company, like nothing can happen. I think this year with COVID, all bets are off. I think there is no real comfort level with working with any company because everything can change in a minute. So I'm very honest with people, this is what our backlog of work is. This is what we're doing to get to the next step. But there is no guarantee with any company of what's going to happen tomorrow. And being that honest with some people works for some people, and for some people it doesn't. So you kind of have to, know that, but you also have to look at your own track record. We're still here and we're still kicking it and we're growing, 50% a year. So we're doing something right. And it's also being honest with your customers. And sometimes they need to hear things that they don't want to hear, and that's a hard thing to do. The other thing I think kind of talked a little bit more about boundaries. Boundaries are a big deal. Is everybody kind of needs to know what's acceptable and not acceptable, especially when you're dealing with customers. And then when I talk about delegating, that's really it's really, really hard when you're in charge of something and you're trying to control the path of your company. It's hard to not fall into that mold of kind of being a little bit of a control freak. And sometimes you kind of just step back and say, you know what, this person can do this just as well as I can, and I'm going to let them do it. And you got to be brave, right? You got to be brave and trust and let them grow in that. And that's a big deal. And I think it's really, really important. I used to watch the show The Prophet a lot because I was always impressed by kind of his attitude about how people dealt with their employees. And one of them that's important to me is, sometimes you need to give your key employees an actual stake in the company, right? If they're that key and you need them and they are helping you grow, they need to know that they have a piece of it. I don't think there's a lot of companies that really do that much. And I think it's a game changer when you talk about commitment. And I totally believe in that. And The other thing is you got to have your own mentors. You got to have somebody that, I need somebody to talk to and say, all right, how do we get to the next step? I have a couple of people that work for Salesforce that I'll just call up and say, what should I do next? Where should I aim? What should we be developing? And so one of the things that we did is during this kind of weird COVID, I feel like this 2020, everybody's kind of sat back and looked at their business again and said, do we need to pivot? Do we need to do something different? And so, I took the opportunity of having a couple of people who were laid off that were formerly my employees at when I was working for General Dynamics doing Army contracting. They were amazing employees. And I said, well, they were amazing before, they're still going to be amazing. They got laid off because of COVID. It had nothing to do with their skill set. I decided to hire them, and we kind of started our own little division of developing apps for Salesforce. So we're going to be working on those things. And that's a learning process for all of us. Oh, wait till you hit a security review. That's a barrel of laughs. And we're learning all of that together. And we're trying to find little niche apps that we can build that will help people out. And so I decided, well, that's a great way to pivot, because if you get something that hits, that's a whole different revenue stream, right? Not just going to keep us going further. So those are some key ways that I've tried to build a team. But it's funny, and I know a lot of you on the call are provide resources for businesses. and I'm sorry, I'm the one that always goes, nope, I'll go find them myself, right? Because I think it's fun, because I'm not going to look in the same places they're going to look. I'm going to look in places with people that have maybe skill sets that they didn't know they had. Sometimes people can be really good project managers because every job they've ever gone to, they've really realigned the business processes of that company and made them better, and they just weren't recognized for it, right? I think that happens a lot. My project manager was doing that in the auto industry. And so there's a lot of transferable skills. And I am going to be, in 2021, I'm going to be starting also kind of some little monthly, instead of calling them lunch and learns, I thought we should call them happy hour training or something. Just attacking little subjects that sometimes people struggle with when they're learning Salesforce, like formulas, things like that. So I'm going to start that in 2021. And if you follow us at Southern Cloud Solutions, those invitations will be out there. And then, I'll publish them in some other areas as well. And then what do you get when you do all of this, right? You get employees that align with your company values, because you've kind of been driving that through them as you're training them. Every company has a different way that they approach things. And so you're developing your company and to align with exactly how you want to be and how you want to present yourself. You end up with people that you can count on all the time. You end up with a lot of energy because they're so kind of thankful and happy that they've gotten this opportunity. There's such a positive energy about the whole thing. You get such an increased ability to collaborate within your team. It's so funny because, I have a home office attached to my house, and I run, all the meetings out of here. And my boyfriend was in the room the other day, and he goes, "Why is everyone laughing when you're on a meeting?" He goes, "You guys just sound like you're having so much fun. Is that work?" And it is work, because none of us take each other very seriously. We do serious work, but we're people, and we all everyone has a really different personality, and we do enjoy each other's company a lot. And then what you get out of this is you just get more success, right? Their success is your success, and that's what really what a team is, right? And so that's kind of I feel like you get a lot more of that when you really mentor and develop your own team and teach them all the aspects of Salesforce. Are there any questions?
What was the largest hurdle for you when you first got started with your own company?
So one of the hurdles in getting started is getting the leads, right? Everyone knows Salesforce doesn't share their customer base with anyone. So one of the hurdles was overcome by just reaching out to a lot of Salesforce sales executives. But it's also it's kind of twofold. We made alliances and met a whole bunch of sales execs that when they needed a partner, then they'd be like, oh yeah, I remember, Southern Cloud, let me talk to them. You have to make those connections with people in order to kind of get the leads that you need to grow your business. What someone told me one time, which actually has turned out to be very true, they told me this like 5 years ago. They said, once you build a decent customer base, then what happens is other people hear about you, kind of by referral. And also, you may get customers that are with you for years and years and years. And we do have about 50% of our yearly customers are customers that we've had for like 3 years or more. And we just do a different project with them every year. I mean, I have one guy who sets aside a certain budget and he's like, all right, for 2021, we're going to do this. I'm like, oh, okay, let's line it up. We have a lot of repeat customers. And like, I have a customer in Orlando who they're starting to add divisions in other countries. And I just keep spinning up their Salesforce org, okay, here's the one for Canada. Here's the one for the UK. Here's the one for Australia. And so I think that's the fun about being a small business too. If you're working with other small businesses and they're growing, then they just keep using you, right? So a lot of it is contacts and being at some of these conferences and being present and kind of sharing your wealth of knowledge with other people. And then more and more people know who you are, right? Because you're kind of selling you and what you do. And so that was one thing, is we got a big spike in business after making a lot of contacts with some of the sales staff at Salesforce.
How did you start the business?
I started just as a simple LLC, and it was just me. And then I started hiring people, and then we transitioned to an S corporation. And we also are registered as, a women-owned small business in the state of Florida and nationally. But I actually retired from my government contracting job and I took some time off and decided what I was going to do next. And I learned Salesforce from another consultancy and decided to go out on my own. So I took a big risk, but I felt like that it was worth it and that I would get kind of more out of what I wanted to be in the end by going out on my own.